Welcome back to the Loose Frame Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Tyler Martin Olich, and joining me...
I'm Hillary Weber.
And I'm Jesse Brock.
Hello, ladies. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I don't know why I said hello, ladies, like the ladies' man.
Hello, ladies.
Yeah. Is that too old of a reference? Does anyone remember
I know
Ladies'
the ladies'
Man?
Okay, but I don't know if he's aged well in our current climate.
Yeah, I don't think that would play anymore.
No.
Well, let's talk about something that would play, which is our amazing guest today.
Mr. Paul Wilson.
And Hillary, where have we seen Paul Wilson from earlier in our podcast career?
You have seen him here on the Loose Framing Podcast.
Yes.
He was our very first guest, and he is back again.
Our very first guest.
Well, he was one of two.
One of two, yeah.
So it was Paul Wilson and Eugenie Bondurant, both locals here. They live here and they work here, but they were also both in The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, which was the third installment in the Conjuring series, I believe.
I think the movie was just about to come out, and we
caught him.
We caught him right before when they were doing the press tours. But we didn't have a chance to really talk with Paul about his career, and because we were so focused on The Conjuring and acting and how they got there. Yeah. So I think we're gonna have a really good conversation today.
Yep. He has a pretty long list of movies that he was in. The Conjuring being one of them, but Big Stone Gap, which he will talk about, which came out in 2014, but stars his brother, Patrick Wilson, and Ashley Judd, and a slew of other
Goldberg. Yeah,
Whoopi Goldberg. Yep. And he was also, we'll talk about this later, but played Nixon numerous times in numerous productions, but in The First Lady alongside Viola Davis. Who else was in that? Viola Davis, Gillian Anderson, and Michelle Pfeiffer. He has a lot of stuff that he's going to be talking to us today about.
I think Michelle Pfeiffer plays his wife in it.
Well, he is lucky for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got a face. You've probably seen him on screen, even if you don't recognize the name. He has showed up on your TV or in a film that you've watched.
Yeah. Wait, no, it wasn't his wife. He's on the way out. I think Michelle Pfeiffer plays LBJ's wife.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because the Watergate scandal. Anyway, well,
you'll have to watch it, and he'll talk to you about it. But his voice is mesmerizing. I think he has a great podcast voice. He comes from a news background, along with his very famous news family. So enjoy for that aspect.
Not his news family, just famous in general. Just incredibly talented family.
Yeah.
Multiple generations of talented people.
Yes.
Clearly genetics and just a passion for all things theater and music really goes a long way. But with that, we'll be right back with our guest. Welcome back to the Loose Frame Podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Martin Olich, and joining me is our first returning guest, my friend, actor, Paul Wilson. Hey, buddy. How are you? I don't know how we did that. Let's do that again.
All right.
Bad. There we go.
Still works.
You
still got it.
And not until I have a cup of coffee in me.
That's
but
a good idea.
We're getting there this morning. You are our first returning podcaster, or guest, I should say, and you were actually our very first podcast guest 3 years ago, which I can't believe it's been that long.
What do I get?
What do you get? You got a free cup of coffee.
Okay, perfect.
Courtesy of our off-camera co-host, Jesse Brock. What were you promoting at the time? It was Conjuring 3.
Conjuring 3 had just come out. That's right. Yeah.
Which had Eugenie on as well, and we were talking about Conjuring 3 and acting and how you got into Conjuring 3. A major Hollywood hit.
Yeah.
With you still being here in Tampa Bay, but we didn't get enough time with you just to sit down and talk about your past, all the amazing things that's happened, your incredibly talented family, which it's kind of crazy. We'll go through that in a second here, just how talented they are.
It's not my fault.
It's not. Genes definitely make a difference. But let's start there. So you were born, in Big Stone Gap, right?
No, Richmond, other side.
Okay.
Yeah. Dad is from the mountains of Virginia, Big Stone Gap. He was born there. And then Mom grew up on the eastern shore of Virginia, over southeast of Richmond. And then they met in college in Richmond. It was called Richmond Professional Institute, which is now VCU, in Camelot on stage. So the whole thing started on a show.
That's amazing. So obviously they were both attracted to the arts, theater. Your dad ended up being a very well-known journalist and a news TV host, not host, what I want to say, what's the right word?
News anchor.
News anchor. Thank you.
Journalist, yes.
Not my brain's not there. And your mother, very, very talented, singer, vocalist, theater. I mean, so many different things. So they were, from the very beginning, they were really into the arts.
Yeah, and I don't know. My father will tell you that when he grew up in the mountains of Virginia, you had to take the antenna and walk up on the mountain to get a signal, and he would emulate Edward R. Murrow. And because he talked like he was from the mountains of Virginia. So you can't get a real job with that kind of accent, is what he thought. And so it was always, and he wrote in high school, he wrote a letter to Edward R. Murrow and said, look, I'm kind of curious about journalism, but what do you think I should study in college?
Yeah.
And he wrote him back and said, humanities, arts, history, forget journalism. That will come. But be a well-rounded individual, and learn kind of culture and stuff. And so that kind of may have been, if he was here, he would probably say that was probably the fuse that was lit. And then when he went to college, and of course he had a band in high school called the Sophisticats, and he played trombone. And they were a swinging fun jazz band. And then he was, but he was also the drum major in high school. I think population 2,000. To this day, I think is about that, maybe 1,500. And so then went off to college. Mom, kind of in a similar, as they converged, she taught herself how to play organ in rural Virginia and South Carolina, and was doing that at 14 years old. So that was her job, right? And then she was always a choir director and teacher. So then obviously the natural progression to go to college and study music, then they met. And Dad was Lancelot, and she was in the chorus, but she was in charge of the music.
Yeah.
So they hit it off immediately.
So how long have they been married?
How old am I? 57 years.
Wow. Okay. That's a real love story there.
Heck yeah. I mean, and both dirt poor. They didn't know it, but grew up around it. So it became kind of the theme that, I said something one time that it was like, because Mom was always we grew up singing in church choirs, and she was among a great organist and also a great teacher. She was a great choir director, and we put them together all over the state. So it was like there was always music. Yeah. And that was like kind of Mozart or church music was always kind of the soundtrack of our lives growing up until Van Halen. But we can get into that later.
Yeah, we will get into that later. And the Wilson van, we'll definitely do a plug for that. So you were born in Richmond, the first of the prodigal children. And what's the age difference between your brothers?
Mark and I are 18 months apart.
Okay.
And he also was born in Richmond. And then Dad at the time got a job in Virginia Beach doing the news and television. This is 1969-ish. Television was emerging. Local news was emerging. They were still shooting on film. But he got this job at Virginia Beach. And then so we moved down there. In 1973, Patrick was born in Norfolk, Newport News area. And from there shortly, and that was kind of the typical nomadic movement of news anchors. You hop around, right?
Yeah.
So from there, he got an offer in Charlotte. We went to Charlotte. We were there, and it was a lovely time in Charlotte until about 1979-80. And then we went to St. Louis briefly, watched the Cardinals win the World Series in 82. And then they called him from a little thing called WTSP, Channel 10 in St. Petersburg. And I'll never forget it. We were sitting in St. Louis, and we had several acres and out in the kind of the West County area of St. Louis. And he had come down for the interview and brought these brochures.
Just showing the beaches and
like, this is where we're moving to. And we were like, that's where people visit. People don't live there, do they? But at the time, St. Louis, it was kind of, I think, like market size 19 or so, a top 20, but it was declining. And Tampa Bay was growing.
Yeah.
So they kind of flipped.
Yeah. What's Tampa Bay now? The 11th largest?
Yeah.
Largest media market.
We're that close from being 10.
So what year was that when you came in?
83.
83. So have you been a consistent resident of St. Pete, Tampa Bay since 83?
Yeah, except with the exception of going to Florida State in college. Did that. And but yeah, I always, even and I studied theater in college, of course, and like we all did, that was kind of the rite of passage. but I didn't want to hit the road.
Yeah.
I didn't want to go to New York. Maybe I kind of came along as the walking hat rack right when digital was coming, and they were getting out. My first movie was shot on film, so that was a long time ago. But to see kind of the convergence, the rise of cable television and cable networks and various content just burst through the late 80s and early 90s, before a thing called the internet, right? Or that we knew. So I was like, I think I can do this at home.
Yeah.
And I wasn't really focused on the acting part. I was really focused on just kind of wanting to get involved as best as I could. But I wanted to, again, back to the walking hat rack. I like the media so much, and we grew up around it.
Yep.
And I love the public relations part, and certainly to be able to help now filmmakers. They've got a product called a movie, but it needs an audience.
Yeah.
Or it's not going to get consumed, right? So it's kind of the same skill set, and I always wanted to do that too.
Yeah. Well, all of your brothers will just concede that they're all, you as well, musically inclined. But it seems like each one of you picked sort of a different path, where Mark went all in on journalism and ended up taking over for your dad,
right,
as the evening news anchor. Your brother Patrick obviously went into movies and theater, very well known. We were talking about Conjuring 3. He's got 3-4 franchises now that he's in.
Yeah,
at least. And you, very talented actor, musically incredibly inclined, but you did have that drive to get more into PR, marketing. Where did that come from? Like, what point in your career? Was it college?
College. So, met a girl. It always starts with a girl. Met a girl whose dad owned an advertising agency. And I was like, advertising? Oh, that's that show 30-something, right? What is advertising? And as an artist, as a writer, and, kind of a hack photographer, that was an industry where I could do everything, and produce. And being in, growing up in newsrooms and growing up in television stations, I mean, I was, 19, 20 and producing commercials, way ahead of my, older contemporaries because I grew up around it. But FSU and that experience in college and interning for him that one summer when I came home really kind of changed, because that gave me the target.
Yeah.
Like I knew that I wanted the dog, I wanted the wife, I wanted the kids, I wanted the house, all that stuff. But then all of a sudden it was like, now I know how to do it. Learn that media business. And again, growing up around news and understanding ratings, and that was always just kind of old hat that I think a lot of people take for granted, but it was fun. It's still fun to me.
Yeah. If we can go off a little side path here, just talking about you in college, it was right around that time that Ted Bundy was active, and that seems like a total non sequitur, I'm sure, for people listening.
Well, I'll bring it back.
Yeah. But that had sort of an impact not only on you, but your family.
Yes. And I think it's fair to say that most, even if you can call them adult kids in college, try to find, if not kind of are pulled to emulating their parents in some shape or form, right? If your mom or dad's a lawyer, then that's kind of a likely path, or at least you're going to try it unless you hate it. And then you're going to love it if you love it, right? So I was in college and it was 1989. The execution of Ted Bundy was January 24th of 89. And I was doing, and all of a sudden, if you just notice, I just fell right back into the radio voice because I was the news director at the campus radio station. Yeah. And then we had a chance for some interns to come in, and one of them was Mark Wilson, my brother. So I got to hire him, and he was good. And I was like, And so I created a show that was every Wednesday. So I got away from the daily news stuff. By the way, that's all volunteer.
Yeah.
You run into class and then you run to the station or whatever, which, right there on campus. But we came home that one summer, this really before I kind of dove into advertising and media. And it was, we interned at Channel 10 where Dad was, the main news anchor. And at night we'd go see him, after the 11 o'clock show, and we wanted to make demo tapes. So we made Good Evening, and I think I still have mine somewhere. I think I did a story on Taco Bell coming to St. Petersburg. And then Mark did his, and I was like, he's pretty good. And so it was like, well, I don't want to compete with him because we're as much fun as we have together. There's really no competition, right? Especially from me. No. So went back to college. Mark progressed into the mass communications school at Florida State and then got into television news and studied that. And I had a chance on the radio to come down and interview my father, who was going to witness Ted Bundy's execution. And I remember convincing my boss at, 20 years old, like, I'm going to get an interview with a witness. Who? Can't tell you.
Yeah.
But we got to go down to Stark. You're late every day. Who is your witness? My dad. Then I'm going. So we all, took the sojourn an hour and a half or so down to the prison, got there early in the morning because the execution was at 7:10-ish a.m. It was just a phalanx of satellite trucks.
Yeah.
And I was sitting there setting up my little card table, my little Marty transmitter, getting my mic ready right in front of the podium where Bob McMaster was his name, the head of DOC, was going to announce, when it was time that Ted Bundy was pronounced dead.
Yeah.
But I'm sitting there focusing on Dad.
Yeah. At the time, just to bring your dad a little bit more into the story, it was a lottery system, right, amongst the news agencies to be able to witness the execution?
Yes. And so because they don't do this anymore quite like this, but because some of the victims were from Tampa Bay, they wanted the media, not the family, the media to be represented to cover the story as part of being from the original market. Interestingly enough, he was not the first choice. The station was, because it was ABC, right? And Good Morning America was broadcasting live too. But the first reporter that was asked to go was so freaked out because of his religious beliefs. He didn't want to see that. So that's when they went to Dad and said, you want to do it? And they sent him to a psychiatrist to get ready for what he's about to see. And then after you see it, we'll talk about it when you get back. But it was because Bundy promised an interview.
Yeah.
Remember, he dragged them out, and he really held on. Even our wonderful ex-governor Bob Martinez. I've talked to him about this very thing. Bundy played these games with all these law enforcement. He goes, there's probably could tell you where some more bodies are. And so it was like, what? And ultimately, of course, it was Tuesday became Friday.
Yeah.
And he was fried. But that interview, I'm sitting there and watch the Serpentine Drive and the white van comes out and I see my dad and it's about 7:05, 7:10 in the morning. And it's 58 or so and he's sweating and his shirt's all loose. And, it's like, I describe it as like we all have had those moments where we realize that our parents are just people and not superheroes.
Yeah.
And I remember putting that mic up to him and going, oh my God, I don't want to do this. And that was it for me.
Yeah.
No more news, no more looking at it as a potential. It was like, no. I'm going back to theater school and I'm going to study advertising and I'm going to be able to do all the fun stuff because that's too rough. And I had never seen him like that. Of course, he snapped right back out of it, but it was me, I think. If it was another reporter, he could have been much more detached.
Yeah.
But that was a seminal moment in my life that kind of went, no, I'm going back to study arts.
Different trajectory.
Yep.
So you graduate from college, you come back to St. Pete. Did you start your own company right away?
No.
Or how did you cut your teeth?
Went right back to, actually, as I like to say, I went away to college and came home to school. I graduated from University of South Florida and here in Tampa. But I came right back to where I was interning at that ad agency. Mm-hmm. And so then it became, I'm making $300 a week. I'm rich.
Yeah.
I got a BMW now. It's the late 80s, early 90s, by the way. And so went right back to work for him. And then did that for about 5 years. And then he passed away. But several of the people that were in his group kind of created their own ad agency. So I migrated with them, but I got right back into it.
Yeah. Let's peel away some of your news anchor veneer and talk a little nerd stuff here. I know you're a huge Star Wars fan.
Oh, yes.
And an incredible Star Wars fan. In fact, you have a very large collection of memorabilia. Was that the movie that you first saw that was like, ooh, maybe I could do this? What excited you about, I know you have a theater background, but what about movies?
Definitely Star Wars. New Hope, number 4, was a indelible Sharpie right across my head going, pay attention. But I think it was also because it was the imagination that everyone was pulled into this world that was created by Lucas. And of course the toys. And I was famous for getting the little action figures and setting up my own little scenes. So I was already directing at 13 years old. Then Raiders of the Lost Ark. And it was like, all right, this is it.
So do you think the creativity in things like Star Wars or Indiana Jones, whatever it inspired in your imagination, do you think that helped you in your PR and marketing pursuits, just to think outside of the box that anything is possible?
Definitely. And anything is possible is a great way to say it. I remember being so inspired by Star Wars, and I think again I was 11 when I saw that at the Charlottetown Mall in Charlotte, North Carolina, and it was just, I mean, I couldn't get over it. I went home and wrote my own book about people who lived in the moon. So that was,
Yeah.
I mean, my mom still has it, So that was definitely a way to kind of catalyze my thinking to, I can create this. There are no limits now.
Yeah.
There's no fence line. Then the adventure that I think, Lucas and Spielberg, of course, took us on with Harrison Ford and Raiders was just, now the sky's the limit, And I remember saying to my father, when we walked out of that theater, all the good stories are being told right now. And he looked at me and said, you still got a couple in you. You just keep thinking about that. And that became kind of another one of those remember that.
Yeah.
So
all right, you're interning at an advertising agency, and then you start working for them. Were you still active in local theater or commercials at the time, just trying to act?
Yeah. So during the day, I was, wearing the tie in the advertising agency, and then at night, especially in the spring, it was still an incredible group, American Stage. We would do Shakespeare in the Park in the spring. And that was a long run, usually middle of April till middle of June. And you're lucky if you got all the shows with the summertime.
Yeah.
So because I studied Shakespeare in London and then did, of course, that in college as well, to be part of that troupe, and it was like Merry Wives of Windsor set in the Old West with Cole Porter music. And so it was hard to balance all that stuff. But I did that for 2 seasons with them, as I was also singing with mom and dad in the orchestras.
Yeah.
So they were, for 27 or 8 years, they were kind of the featured vocalists with the orchestra for the big Coachman Park 4th of July event in Clearwater. And so they would do the Broadway stuff, and then I would do the Frank Sinatra stuff and the swing stuff and, standards. So that kind of kept me doing it.
Yep.
There's nothing like being on stage except not being on stage. It's like you're not an actor unless you're acting, or creating, So for me, I was able to kind of keep, again, back to the walking hat rack. Kept the music going. I was also a featured soloist at Mom's church. She had not retired yet, so I was doing that every Thursday and Sunday as the bass, and then singing around the state when I could. And then I think it was a singing engagement at Tampa Theater, where a French-born producer walks up to me as I'm singing Frank Sinatra and says, "Here's my card. We're doing a movie in South Africa. We'd like for you to be in it. Where do you live? New York?" And I went, "St. Pete."
Right around the corner, yeah.
Yeah. And next thing you know, I was whisked off to Cape Town for about 5 weeks, and that was the first movie set in Tampa called Citizen Verdict.
But it's shot
And
in
we
South
shot
Africa.
90% of it in South Africa, because I think the Kruger Rand to dollar ratio was like 10-1.
Yeah, it has to be.
I mean, I was like handing out my per diem to my driver, like, "Come on, buy something for your mom." I'm not taking this home. It's Kruger Rand. That's
What year was that?
2000.
2000. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll get to Wilson Van here and more in depth in a little bit, but I was just curious, were you and your brothers always like a garage band growing up?
No. In fact, that's the fun part, is that, again, we were all in Mom's choirs. So we were all kind of, when we weren't in robes and watching her direct us, it was, what do we do? We had summer camps that she ran, and I think it was my idea, or it might have been Mark's idea. Let's do a lip sync contest. No real instruments. So I think I broke into one of the cabins, found a saber saw and a piece of 1/4-inch plywood, and cut out the guitar, and we painted it and put fishing line on it. No instruments, but we made them. And that was the summer of 79, I think that started, where we were doing lip syncs of Van Halen. And so then it turned, and then about 1982, 83, 84 hits, and Jump. And now Eddie Van Halen, the guitar god, is playing the keyboard. We've got to get a keyboard. Now, we had pianos all over the house.
Yeah.
But I wanted a Yamaha DX21 because it sounds just like it. So we get that. Patrick wants some drums. Mark had played violin as a kid until he heard Van Halen 1, and then got his own guitar. Never had a lesson, but has an incredible ear. And so we would start jamming. We had this room called 911, a spare bedroom in mom and dad's house. And we would get in there and I'd start and like, who's going to sing that? I don't know the words. Well, I can't do that song. So we would never finish a song. And we never, we would just play and just screw around, when we weren't in sports or football or baseball or soccer. And then Mark won this lip sync contest against a real guitarist who's a really great guitarist here in town, Dave Erasmo. And it was like, I think I want to play guitar at Mark. So we go to college and finish that up. He's playing guitar in college. We had some really fun parties with Mark playing guitar. And it was about 15 years ago, it was his birthday. And he has since now, builds his own guitars. I mean, from guts to
and it's truly amazing guitarist. I mean, we can't oversell
taught himself
that.
to play. I mean, again, and it was his birthday. And Patrick had called and said, "What are we going to do for Mark for his birthday? Let's just find a little bar we can pick up and let him, let the newsman go jam because people might like it." And that turned into, well, let me call him and see if he can really play all the songs, because I don't know if he can play all the songs. So I think I called Mark. I'm like, and so how many Van Halen songs can you play? All of them. No. From beginning to end. Like what if you were going to play them in front of people?
Yeah, not a couple chords here, buddy.
All of them. Oh, and then he emails me back, and here's the song list. And it was like, what? I got to learn all these lyrics? And I called Patrick. I'm like, I think I screwed up. I think he's on to the case. Next thing you know, 300 people show up in this little bar in St. Pete, Nova 535. And then it turns into an article in the St. Pete Times, Tampa Bay Times. And then it turns into a People magazine article. And next thing you know, we still had no name. It was just, let's go play. And the press called us Van Wilson. So that kind of stuck like a dart right in the forehead until I think Alex Van Halen heard about it and asked Patrick, what's his cover band?
Yeah.
So then it turned into we're adding a cousin, and then we wanted to add a saxophone and kind of really open the band up. And so then we changed the name to the Wilson Van. And now 15 years later, and we always do it for charity.
And since we're in it, let's talk about the Wilson Foundation, which does incredible charity work. How many times do you guys do it a year?
Once or twice, depending on schedules.
Sell out crowds every time. It always goes to charity. How much money have you guys raised? I mean, do you have a ballpark?
We're in the 600,000, 650,000 mark right now. The Wilson Family Foundation was formed about 9 years ago. And so the band becomes the instrumentality, if you will, of the foundation, the 501c3. And one of our stars, it's still in the band when he's not making his own, records, and Kyle Schroeder, who's really phenomenal. He was the first recipient of our first grant.
Amazing.
Yeah, our first scholarship. So we like to give, it's always for military, first responders, veterans, of course, but enriching with music and the arts. So in the last couple of years, we've been giving out scholarships to college students and those that go off and study it.
That's amazing.
It's fun. Yeah.
Just a weird question here. Has anyone from Van Halen ever seen you guys perform?
I don't know. Wolfie and Patrick follow each other.
Yeah.
So it's very possible. I remember when Mark walked up to Eddie Van Halen one time with a DVD, a CD for him to sign, and Mark was in his tie. It was at the Don Cesar. And Mark said, hey, I do the news and I play guitar like you. And Eddie looked at him and said, what? Like it just didn't compute. Right? What? But I don't know. I mean, since Patrick and Wolfie seem to connect, it's possible.
Yeah.
That would be a fun guess.
It would be. It would, yeah. Just they're in the back and you don't know about it. Would that shake you guys up if you knew Van Halen was in the back watching you guys play?
No. I mean, it's more of, and we've always approached it like, welcome to the living room.
Yeah.
We don't have time to rehearse. Individually, of course, we kind of work on our own stuff. But when we get together, it's usually like you said, once or twice a year. So it's first time is usually a sound check, 24 hours or so before we have to do it. That turns into an argument of what are we actually going to do, So it's like, well, you know what? If you like it, you can thank me. If you hate it, you can blame my brother.
I've literally been for one of those sound checks, and your guys are talking, you're figuring out the chords and the lines, and like, let's not do this song anymore. It's like, we're gonna do this one instead. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. All right, let's turn it back towards film and commercials here. So I think when we last left off, you were about circa 2000.
Yep,
with the movie down in South Africa. Where did it progress from there? I mean, when did it become your own company? When did you got on your own?
Just about then. So about 2 years later. As this thing called the internet was really emerging as a viable medium, if you will, I kind of split away from the traditional advertising bit, and I have been doing, they used to call them industrial films, I had been making those. And that was a lot of fun, because I could now be cinematic and still run around with crews like I was used to as a kid, and just focus on that for a while. That turned into, some more clients, some more projects. And I'd gotten away because now I'm running my own thing, right? So this is 2002, I believe. 2. And, every now and then I would get an opportunity to go back to stage or sing. Yeah. The singing part really kind of kept me in it with mom and dad, because we knew that was coming twice a year, and so then it was really not until about 7 years later that Adriana Trigiani calls, and she had this book that started out as a screenplay, but no one in Hollywood said, no, you're never going to get movie stars to Big Stone Gap, Virginia, and it costs way too much. In the span of about 4 to 5 years, we're not really shooting on film anymore. And by the way, we can shoot really efficiently digitally, right?
And what was the actual year you filmed Big Stone Gap? Which you guys it's streaming right now. You guys can go watch it.
2010.
2010.
Yeah.
And it had, Ashley Judd in it? Whoopi Goldberg.
Whoopi Goldberg, Ashley Judd, Jenna Elfman, Jane Krakowski, Chris Sarandon, John Benjamin Hickey, and several others. James Hampton.
Yep.
It was one of his last roles. We had so much fun in that movie, but set in the small little town. Yeah. The book had now blown up because no one thought that she could make a movie. Of course, the book takes off, and then Whoopi and Adria are pals, so they're part of this, book club. So it was, here's the part I want. Fine, let's do it.
Yeah.
And it was a chance to go back to the little town that was like, of all the moving that we did as a family from TV station to TV station or market to market, Big Stone Gap was kind of the only consistent part of our lives. Because every time we would go back there, it was like, we're that big again, and it's our grandparents, and even after them, it was the memories. I mean, Mark and I used to talk about, remodeling the house, and the more we kind of think about it, it's like, no, it needs to be just the way it was when we first saw it in 1970 something. But yeah, that movie was kind of the, as they say in showbiz, you don't choose it, it chooses you. So that was a good example of, come here, I got a role for you.
Yeah.
And Patrick, of course, I forgot about Patrick. Patrick is the star of the movie. He's not going to be happy with me if I don't get that in with Ashley. Yes.
I think I met you in 2007 or 2008 for the first time. It was through Sunscreen Film Festival.
Yes.
And you were helping out with the fest. But I think it was 2010, same time you were filming Big Stone Gap, was when they were doing like their similar year. I think it was the biggest year up until this year. That's when we had Billy D. Williams. Your brother was there. Yeah. The famous, you might have even done the marketing for us, where it was Patrick's head with the Sunscreen logo on it.
Declan Flynn and I were part of that and managing a lot of that press. Of course, when you get Billy, Patrick had done a movie with Billy D.
Yeah. What was the name of that movie?
Barry Monday.
Barry Monday, that's right.
So we knew we had that movie. And then Patrick, of course, was here too. But to get Billy D and not stroll down the red carpet with R2, some stormtroopers, which was really great. That's the 501st. That all of a sudden, that was 24 years ago.
Yeah.
No,
not that long.
14 years
ago, yeah.
And that was really the first kind of, wow.
Yeah, this could be something.
A lot of fun.
It really was. I think I screwed up that year. You had brought on a brand new sponsor. I think it was a pastor of a church. Wasn't it?
Might have been live over in Tampa?
Yeah.
Might have been.
But it was opening night, and they had brought their entire congregation out, and I had programmed the opening night movie, and I had played Black Dynamite because no one told me that one of the sponsors was a church. And I just, for those who haven't seen Black Dynamite, it is a very funny but very lewd movie.
Yes.
And I just remember sitting in the back, and I'm watching like the first 3 rows, which was all this congregation, and people are like shielding their eyes, and people are walking out. It's like, oh, I think I made a mistake.
Yeah, and that was the only year they sponsored.
Definitely my fault.
No, it's okay. We've grown since then.
We have.
It's about learning.
Don't regret showing the movie though, because it's very funny.
It's a great movie.
So you've done a bunch of movies between then. Do you have a favorite movie that you're in that you look back on and say, wow, I just enjoyed being a part of that crew or the story or whatever it might have been?
Probably Big Stone Gap.
Big Stone Gap.
It was the first time to work with my brother, and because we have such an emotional investment in the area, and then to have the movie named after the town, that'll, and even today, actors and people that work in movies, when you're on that day, it'll never come again, so every detail, every moment, every second matters so much because you're never going to go back. Even if you have to reshoot, it's never the same.
Yeah.
So that one was incredible because we had a 16-day window to shoot. And in the mountains of Virginia, fall is gorgeous, but it's about 15 days.
Yeah.
And the minute that rain comes, all the leaves fall off. But that was the first one. Certainly, to be able to do that again with Patrick in Conjuring 3, that was a lot of fun. That was the big studio movie, if you will, where I got to do some fun stunts and scream and get stabbed and all that stuff. It's all fake. But
it looked like you might have hit your shoulder pretty hard.
I did. And that's a funny story because we had a timing. They had built the frame out of balsa wood. So when I hit the door, it explodes, right?
Yeah.
But the door was real. And so on the other side was production guy who was huge. And I think his name was David. And it was like 2 hit. And I didn't do that.
Yeah.
And he's leaning on the door. So there's friction. And I went, David, bang, right? And we had to do that like 14 times.
Yeah. I don't know if it was that particular take, but man,
I still feel it.
I know you well enough when that scene hits, it's like, oh, he's really hurt.
Oh, yeah.
Something is not right.
Oh yeah. I soaked in Epsom salts like for 4 hours that night.
Yeah.
And funny thing was we had done it again and I'm lying there and we're waiting and to hear Shavs in Village go, do we have it? And he's like, okay, that's great. Back to him. We're going to do one more. And I'm lying there. Patrick's standing over me and goes, and you wanted to be in Conjuring. Very fun story. So those two are great, but certainly Big Stone Gap, I would say, is number one.
Do you have a local project you work on? Could have been a commercial or a feature or something that in the Tampa Bay area that was particularly fun to work on?
The State Fair. We had a lot of fun with the State Fair, and we had a chance to work with them for several years, but I think it was 2012 that was the 500th anniversary of Florida. Mm-hmm. That was the state's Viva Florida campaign, I believe. And I remember leaving the State Fair, and they had said, because they're quasi-government managed, they're like, you have to embrace this. I'm like, history is not art. History is history. How am I going to make that fun for a state fair?
Yeah. And
it hit me before I hit the bridge of what were they looking for? The Fountain of Youth.
Yeah.
The fair is the Fountain of Youth. That was a really fun shoot.
I remember that campaign. That's the one where it's the conquistadors walking through the torches. I think you shot that at Fort DeSoto, right?
We did, yes. Yeah. Yes. And we were not supposed to bring fire, but we did. And luckily, they were wonderful down there. And I did have some off duties and some people that really knew what they were doing. But that was a little bit dodgy. But we only had this boat because the shot was the boat. But we only had basically from the middle of the hull to the front because it was like this deteriorated old boat. So we had to shoot around the missing part and just have feet come out. That was probably that and 1-800-ASK-GARY was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
To be part of those brands and work with those people but be creative, that was the fun part because we did something that no one had done yet.
So you've been here, since what did we say, 78?
No, 83.
83, sorry, 83. Yeah, 83. What has kept you in this area? You could have moved anywhere.
Family.
Yeah.
I think for us, not unlike the arts, is because our, the Wilson oak tree roots run deep, but it provides beyond the obvious of family and familial, association. That's kind of the strength.
Yeah.
I toyed with LA a little bit, but it was. I mean, my entire life is east of the Mississippi.
Yeah.
I mean, and we have extended family here too. So, and it's pretty tough to beat the weather.
It is. So your kids, they obviously like Star Wars. I think that was probably an influence of yours. Are they equally musically inclined? I mean, are they into acting and theater?
Oh, yes. Now, I think my daughter, Landis, is probably going to skip through that because both of them play piano. They've been singing ever since they were little. My mother was their piano teacher for a while. But Jack hears music a lot, and I think, again, we'll constantly get down on the piano and just kind of write something and play something at 19 years old. But when I took him to the set of Conjuring 3, it was, okay. So that's all he wants to do.
Yeah.
Which, it's a luxury to know what you want to do as a teenager, right? And have that focus like Patrick did. But I think Landis is a lot like me too, where she's got multiple interests. So, but certainly music and art, and I indoctrinated them very early to showbiz. So,
I mean, it'd be hard not to with your family.
Yes.
Let's turn now to a movie that is just now streaming. Correct?
Yes.
Which is Deer Camp. Deer Camp 87?
Deer Camp 86.
86, sorry.
Yes, 87 could be the sequel.
Okay, well, I'm into that. We'll bring it to Tampa Bay.
Yeah.
This, for those who haven't seen it yet, and if you haven't, definitely go check this out. It feels like a John McTiernan summer blockbuster movie from the 80s, which just has all the camp, the fun, and the horror elements of like a Predator. Like it's really good. Give us the elevator pitch for Deer Camp.
Yeah, it's set in 86, and 6 dorks, beer drinking buddies from Detroit decide to go rent a deer cabin up in the kind of middle upper P of Michigan as it's opening weekend of deer season. And they stop at a bar before they get to their cabin and get into a little fray with the locals. And and by the way, the bar is called the Peace Pipe. So that's a hint. And there's not a lot of peaceful activity in there. And then the barmaid dies, and she's Native American. But the dudes don't know it. They continue up to the cabin. She warns them to be nice and to respect the land, make it a merciful kill, take your trash home, all that stuff. Of course, they don't do that.
Yeah.
And then they wake up the next day, and something is in the woods that is going to render justice. And that's all I want to say.
Yeah. And without spoiling anything, the hard effects are really good throughout this movie. I think the costume design is excellent. Let's talk a little bit about your characters. You are the sheriff.
I play sheriff. Yeah, and the sheriff was written for a female. But we thought, since we're dealing with that very heavy subject of raising awareness for missing and murdered and indigenous, I thought it was kind of interesting creatively to have the white guy be part of this, and we worked with the tribe council and the elders. They were on set every day to make sure we were culturally representing properly. But yeah, so I'm kind of the pivot point, if you will, for investigating what's going on. And I think one of Sheriff Paulson's lines is, every time a hunter goes missing, a girl goes missing, and they're always chalked up to bear attacks. So what's really going on?
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, it's a fun little romp. There's a lot of laughs, I think, as you know. But it's dealing with that subject matter. And the guys, by the way, Harold Kronk and Eric Mashila, Kronk, who directed it, he created all that. I mean, he's an artist as well. Yeah. Directed the God's Not Dead movies as well. So it's a kind of a radical change for him, but not for artists, to be creative. But we shot it all up there, and most of it up there in Michigan. And then we shot some of it here, some pickup scenes here.
Yeah, it's really a lot of fun, especially during the summer. I mean, that's definitely it's just like a sit down popcorn Saturday movie.
It does feel like Predator.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. It does, without giving away anything. It just feels like an older way of making a movie, if that makes sense.
Well, and it was during COVID. I mean, in September, so next month, it will have been 4 years that we started this. But it was right in the middle of COVID. And, what do artists do when they can't create? Try to create.
Yeah.
So, and the industry was falling apart. Theaters were dying. So let's just take a small little story. So they saw these billboards. Have you seen her? That are actually, one of them is in the movie. And they were inspired to find out what that meant. And it's an epidemic up there of missing and no trace. Like I think it's like in the 5,200 range right now in Michigan, especially Michigan, Canada, Minnesota, So that's how it started. And then we had this little commune that we created where, we had small little cast, small little team. And I think one person may have had COVID in the whole crew for the whole 19 days we were there. But we kept it really, really, really tight. And that was a lot of work, and we did it for practically, $5 in a bucket of chicken.
So where's the stream right now? Is it on Shudder, if I'm not mistaken, or where?
It's on Amazon Prime.
Yeah.
It's on Google Play. I think it's on iTunes, and it's coming. The next wave is coming soon.
Okay. Definitely check that out if you haven't seen it yet. It was one of my favorite movies we programmed last year for a Gasparilla film.
Right.
We did a late night screening. It was fantastic. What else is coming up for you in the near horizon?
I am going to return to a bit of now I would say a constant in my life, and that is Richard Nixon. So I just finished my third time playing Nixon.
We mentioned President's Wives. What was the name of it?
First Ladies.
First Ladies, yes. Where you played an amazing Nixon.
That's how it started,
so let's go into a little bit about that, because I totally forgot.
Well, yeah, so a friend of mine created that show, First Lady series. And it was really all about kind of, the White House through the eyes of First Ladies. And so the first three were Betty Ford, Eleanor Roosevelt, and Michelle Obama. And Michelle Obama was played by Viola Davis. Betty Ford was played by Michelle Pfeiffer. And then Gillian Anderson is unrecognizable as Eleanor. But obviously, we take the years of where Ford goes from like junior congressman and in 48 months now president because of the Watergate scandal. So my buddy had sent me the sides and say, hey, we just fired our Richard Nixon. We're shooting in Atlanta. If you know anyone that could do Nixon, let me know.
Yeah.
So he didn't know that I've been
doing Nixon
since I was 15 years old. I think I read the high school announcements as Nixon or Johnny Carson or Reagan or all of them. And so I went, well, give me the sides. What are the scenes? And it's the I'm not a crook. Like, we have YouTube now, so I could find those. And I kind of just started watching and going, well, he kind of hunches over and, because most impersonations are meant to be funny. So I wanted to kind of
dial it back a little bit.
Yeah, as best as I could. And went in my little studio, shot it and said, here's your Nixon. Didn't hear a thing. I'm like, oh, well, another fish off the hook. And then 24 hours later, they call and say, we'd love to have you get up here. So that turned into the first time I had done it. And it was great to be with that team up, outside of Atlanta, although it'd be better to do it here. And then that got seen by something else. It turned into the other HBO show, Minx, that was kind of sadly ill-fated series that at the time there was the merger with Warner Brothers and Discovery, so that kind of got lost in the mix. And then most recently, I don't even know the date, but I had just recorded 2 weeks ago that my final little ADR line for a show called Duster, created by J.J. Abrams, where I played Nixon again. So, yeah, that's coming up soon.
Well, maybe we can get you to play Reagan here in a little bit.
I'm working on that too. I would love to do that.
Well, Paul, it has been an absolute thrill to talk to you this morning.
I'm sorry that I was a little shy.
You come from a very demure, quiet family.
Maybe next time I'll have some coffee.
Well, it was an absolute pleasure talking with you. You were our first guest, and let's hope this isn't our last guest now. But it's been a great time.
Thank you
for coming.
Yeah,
appreciate it.
Anytime.
And with that, guys, we'll be right back. And welcome back. Joining me again are my two compatriots,
Hillary
and Jesse. What's up?
What's up? That was a great conversation as always.
I love Paul. He just lights up the room as soon as he walks in.
He does, and he just instantly flows back into that like broadcaster mode. But just tons of energy, great stories, really passionate about what he does. What were some of your takeaways from the conversation?
I loved hearing about Deer Camp 86 and some of the backstory. I didn't realize that his part was originally written for a woman. We showed it at the Gasparilla Film Festival, and it got a great reaction. And I loved that it was like a genre picture, and it also had like a message to it. So it was fun, but it was also something that like made you go home and think afterwards.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
It was a really fun movie. I remember during COVID, he was sending me like daily rough cuts of things. So I got to see it sort of be pieced together in just I love the editing process anyway, but like just seeing how the rough cut transformed into the final version. And when I I'm watching the rough cut, it was all previs stuff. So you're kind of having to imagine like, what does the monster look like? What does this thing do?
Yeah.
But the final product really came out well. I thought the special effects were really good throughout. There's one questionable CGI scene, but everything else is really rooted in like 80s actual like prosthetics and hard effects, and it really feels.
You can tell they grew up watching movies like The Predator.
Absolutely.
Like
it feels a little bit out of time. And I say that in the best way possible. Like this is a movie you would have watched
almost
in the 80s.
nostalgic a little bit, maybe, for the viewer.
So there's supposed to be a sequel someday. I'm hoping for it.
87, like you said,
yeah.
you plugged it, filmed in Tampa.
Hey, bring him here. We got a Seminole tribe. We can do something else here.
We've got some camps that we can turn into hunting camps.
This is who you need to talk to right here, Hillary.
Maybe we incorporate the skunk ape into it somehow. I don't know.
That's fun. Mash up.
What else did you take away?
Touching on the indigenous factor of that, you can kind of tell just through this conversation with him that he's kind of always trying to get to the root of the story a little bit, and he has such a curious mind and just wants to find the heartbeat of the story. And you could tell that through his IMDb too, when you're looking at, whether it's Nixon or like the Watergate or just these historical things that he's picking and choosing, or if it's his hometown in Big Stone Gap, there's always something that he feels a part of and is very passionate about. And when he was talking about going to school for journalism, and the advice that he got was to go for humanities or something that would make you a well-rounded person, and then journalism would come later. I feel like that's great advice for even film students. I feel like if you are a well-rounded individual and you are curious, naturally curious, and looking for the heartbeat of the story, then the rest of it just kind of makes it come to life, whether that's journalism through a story or through storytelling in journalism or in filmmaking. I just felt like that was a really important point to take, and something that I also kind of found in my own experience, because back in my day when I was an undergrad, I wanted to be the next Anderson Cooper. I thought I wanted to be a war correspondent. And then there was a class called Conflict and Resolution in Film, and I wrote the name of this movie down. What is it called? The Wind That Shakes the Barley.
With Cillian Murphy.
It was about the Irish Troubles, and it was with Cillian Murphy. And that, I cried my eyes out after I saw that. And I was like, maybe this is it for me. Maybe there's a different avenue for me. But similar, like when he was saying that story about his dad and the Ted Bundy trials, I was like, wow, I see a lot of myself in what he's saying right now. Yeah. So I think this is an important episode for anybody trying to like create their avenue through storytelling, whether that's through film or writing.
See, I feel terrible now because when I was a kid, I want to be a hitman, and I just. Nothing with the humanities. In fact,
you tried it out. It didn't work.
I tried it a couple times, and I kept missing, which is not a good quality to have in a hitman. I will maybe edit it out. I'm not sure, but culturally sensitive.
Well, Barry.
Probably not.
I mean,
hey, Barry. Yeah, I could. Yeah,
you might have been the ghostwriter on Barry. We never know.
You never know.
No, but I love that you pointed that out about. No matter what medium he's in, advertising, theater, film, always centering the storytelling aspect and letting that lead and the perspective lead. And you can tell that he does use character as a way to really identify and dive into the story deeper. And fascinating.
Yeah. And his musical ability comes into play too with like Wilson Band and projects like that. We've seen them perform at Gasparilla Film Festival.
They were closing night, 2022?
Two festivals ago.
23.
So last year,
2023.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're so fun.
They are, and it's not just Van Halen songs. They do a lot of covers from other things, but it's just the energy they bring, and you can tell they grew up with this music and they love it.
Yeah.
And they also are all not just musically talented, but they're big personality performers and definitely comes out on stage.
Oh yeah, seeing Patrick Wilson behind a drum set is hilarious to me.
Yeah.
But he's very talented.
He
so
is.
is Mark on the guitar.
And Patrick's son, he'll step off stage to, cool down a little bit. His son will come on and he'll just pick up the drum
He
right
was
there.
great,
Yeah, it was really fun.
And Paul, he didn't kind of hype himself up for Wilson Van during the interview, but I'll hype him up now because he is an incredible singer.
He is.
And he does David Lee Roth's high kick probably better than David Lee Roth.
Well, at least current David Lee Roth.
Yes, yeah.
No, he is an incredible singer, and he is the lead singer for most of the songs when the Wilson Van are playing. Patrick comes in a couple times.
Yes, yeah.
And Mark can absolutely shred on the guitar. I mean, really, really good.
Yeah. Are you a Van Halen fan?
I don't mind Van Halen, but
Are you Van Halen or Van Hagar?
Van Hagar?
Are you Sammy Hagar lead singer or David Lee Roth lead singer?
Oh, no, I like Sammy Hagar.
Me too.
Yeah.
Red rocker all the way.
Yeah.
What about you?
Van Halen.
Van Halen. Some diversity. I like it. I like them all. I like them both. So, but do you guys have musical backgrounds? Do you have any kind of musical influence from growing up? Did you take piano lessons?
No, I never took piano lessons. I really wanted to play the violin. And I tried, and about 3 weeks into this semester, the music teacher took me aside and said, please don't come back.
Oh, no.
So I moved from orchestra over to band, and I was like, I want to play the drums. No, it wasn't even the drums. It was the trumpet I tried playing first. And
those are two very different instruments.
yeah, it was. No, it was the saxophone. I tried literally every instrument, I think, at one point in my going through grade school and middle school and all that stuff. And eventually I ended up with the triangle, with a band that played no songs that used the triangle. So I just sat in the back in the corner with my sad little triangle, and I never got to play it. But that was just the professor being nice, be like, this is not for you.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that I wasn't trying.
It's like a participation trophy at that point. Poor thing.
I didn't try the cymbals. I was always offbeat. Like, I just can't. I can't do it.
Yeah, but you still love music, and you've DJ'd in the past, and you have a pretty eclectic taste.
I have a good taste in music, but taste in music does not translate to having an ear for music or the ability to pick it up. And I cannot read notes to save my life. It just nothing works in my head when I'm trying to play an instrument.
Yeah. What about you, Hillary?
I come from a very musical family. Both of my grandparents were musicians. My grandfather was a conductor. He took lessons in every single instrument so that he could better understand the people that were playing. My father is a musician, was a music professor for 40
Played at Carnegie Hall last
Played
year?
at Carnegie Hall last year.
Yeah, I remember that.
He's a percussionist. I'm a percussionist. My brother's a percussionist. So like the Wilson Van, I am lucky enough where I get to perform with my brother sometimes and just have a blast doing it. So when I see them perform, it always reminds me of being up on stage with my brother.
Where do you guys perform at together?
Mostly in Western North Carolina. We do a lot of like bluegrass, but it's like Pink Floyd bluegrass covers, like stuff like that.
That's my niche right there.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. So if you're ever in Asheville or Black Mountain and want to see some bluegrass, or if you're in like polka or anything else, we do anything. If you need a drummer, like we will come and play
the accordion?
with you.
Have you tried?
No, I mostly do like tambourine and shakers and djembe and drum set and stuff like that, and marimba. And then my brother mostly does drum set, and then my father is more of like timpani and piano, but plays everything, and then also sings. So
that's amazing. I grew up in a musical family, and I tried, and I like to say I'm musically inclined. I'm just not musically disciplined. I mean, you've seen me at karaoke. I like to throw down when I'm feeling it, but I just don't keep up with trying to like learn guitar.
You like jam
bass.
bands, which makes me question your musical tastes.
I mean, when you're jamming. You just don't want it to stop for 15 minutes at a time.
Unless you're on the triangle and not getting any chances to play, in which case it's miserable.
This song ends, please.
You're like, I want my turn.
Just waiting.
My brother is a drummer. Well, first of all, my dad's a drummer, and he was a drummer all throughout high school, and then he was the drummer for a Christian band when I was growing up. And they had like their time on TV and radio. And
your soon-to-be husband is a drummer.
Yes, my fiance. I guess I'm a glutton for punishment because now I went from a family of drummers to I'm starting a family with a drummer. So there's drums all over the house, which I'm like, I guess I was,
I feel like drummers have a certain personality too.
Yeah, they do. They do. That's where I'll leave it at
That's
that.
definitely the voice of
Yeah.
someone who has lived
Yeah.
with multiple percussionists.
But my brother got a drum set when he was 3 years old, and he was like a savant. I swear to God, he could play "Hot for Teacher," which is a Van Halen song, when he was 5 years old, which is insane. So I always tell him, like, if we had YouTube when we were growing up, you would be famous. But
He's
you
a
know,
wrestler,
yeah.
which also seems like a glutton for punishment too.
Yeah, I come from a pretty interesting family,
Yeah.
myself included. So
Yeah, professional wrestler, I
Yeah,
should say. Yeah. Wrestler, I mean, that could mean so many different things.
Yeah.
I don't know. Just
he's going to be on Monday Night Raw.
very cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
background, but hey, that's TV.
Hey,
that's
do it.
huge. It's a big step. He's
Absolutely.
been doing it for a while, so I'm proud of him. But yeah, so that's it on my musical background. I mean, is anybody up for lessons? Maybe a group activity, team building? Want to go?
That would be great. Let's have a little Film Tampa Bay drum circle.
Hillary can show us what's up with the percussion.
But I just have to sit there and never play my triangle. No one knows why
No
I'm on stage.
triangles allowed on
Yeah,
set. Yeah, PTSD.
Oh,
much.
man.
We'll have to include Birdie in on that.
Well, it was a great discussion as always.
Yes.
Had a lot
and
of fun.
before we wrap
Oh,
up, I
yeah.
do want to plug again the Wilson Van, because it is a foundation and it is a nonprofit, and everything that they raise through those concerts it's donated to military families, first responders, and there's grants that they award. So please support them, like them, go to their shows. They don't happen a lot, but when they do, they are sold out, and
About
there's so
twice
much
a year.
energy.
And it's usually big venues too.
Yeah.
They were just at State Theater over in Tampa, I think 2 months ago, because I went to
Yeah.
the show.
And seriously talented people.
Incredibly talented, and it's
Yeah.
just a really
It's a
good
party.
time. Yeah, it's a party atmosphere.
It's a party.
Good time. But yeah, please support them, support the arts in general, and definitely check out Deer Camp if you haven't seen it yet.
Yep. Streaming on Amazon Prime, Google, and iTunes, I believe.
Yep.
Yep.
All right. Well, with that, let's close it out. Miss Brock, where can they find us?
We are Loose Framing Podcast. Stream us anywhere you listen to podcasts or watch us on YouTube. And don't forget to follow us at Film Tampa Bay.
And with that, we'll see you next time.